Sumeria is the oldest civilization in the region of Mesopotamia, and possibly the oldest of humanity's great civilizations. The Sumerians are recognized for establishing the world's first writing system, the first legal codes, the first irrigation systems, the first wheeled vehicles, and other significant contributions to human advancement. The earliest settlement in the Sumer region, in southern Mesopotamia, is the site of Tel el-Weli, dated to 6,500 before Christ. Most historians suggest that Sumerian civilization began around 5,500 before Christ, when the region was permanently settled by a people from Western Asia who spoke the Sumerian language. This marks the beginning of the Ubaid period, the prehistoric era of Mesopotamia, named after the Tel el-Weli site discovered in 1919. From this point on, the establishment of the first Sumerian city-states along the Tigris and Euphrates rivers began. In 5,400 before Christ, the city of Eridu was founded, regarded as the oldest city in southern Mesopotamia. The Sumerians believed that their civilization had been brought to Eridu by their god Enki, the Sumerian god of water. They developed the first irrigation systems, and agricultural practices may have led to the emergence of year-round urban settlements. The Ubaid period was also characterized by the emergence of a distinct style of high-quality painted pottery, which spread throughout Mesopotamia and into the Persian Gulf. Around 5,000 before Christ, the city of Uruk was founded, and by 4,100 before Christ, the Uruk period began, named after the city of Uruk, the most important city of that time. It was during this period that urban life developed in Sumerian civilization. The Sumerians believed in various gods known as the Anunnaki. Each city was centered around a type of temple called a ziggurat, dedicated to its patron deity and governed by a king-priest closely linked to the local religious rites. It was also during this period that painted pottery declined, as copper began to gain popularity, along with cylinder seals used for making impressions on wet clay. By around 3,800 before Christ, the city of Ur was founded, one of the most important cities in Sumerian civilization. Still within the Uruk period, the volume of goods transported along the canals and rivers of southern Mesopotamia facilitated the emergence of many large cities with populations of over 10,000 inhabitants, a significant number for any city of the time. Uruk became the most urbanized city in the world, and the first to exceed 50,000 inhabitants. During this time, Sumerian cities began to make use of slave labor, and by the end of the 4th millennium, Sumer was divided into several independent city-states. Around 3,100 before Christ, the Jemdet Nasr period began. The hallmark of this period is its pottery with geometric and figurative designs depicting trees and animals. But the Jemdet Nasr period is also known as one of the formative stages of cuneiform writing, the oldest known writing system in the world. The oldest clay tablets come from Uruk and date back to the end of the 4th millennium before Christ. The centralized buildings suggest that settlements of this time were very organized, with a central administration regulating all aspects of the economy. Around 2,900 before Christ, the early dynastic period in Mesopotamia began, a possible mythical period of Sumer. An ancient text written in Sumerian called the Sumerian King List lists Sumerian kings from this period. According to the list, the early reigns lasted for thousands of years. During this time, a flood completely inundated the city of Shuruppak and several other cities such as Ur, Uruk, and Lagash. Some scholars believe this flood, known as the Sumerian Deluge, may be linked to the Sumerian creation myth called the Genesis of Eridu, dated to 1,600 before Christ. The story states that the gods sent the flood to destroy humanity, and that the Sumerian god of water warned Ziusudra, the ruler of Shuruppak, to build a large boat to preserve the animals and the seeds of humanity. In 2,800 before Christ, the first dynasty of Uruk began. A poem from this time called the Epic of Gilgamesh recounts the legendary exploits of Gilgamesh, a possible historical king of the city of Uruk. In 2,600 before Christ, the first dynasty of Ur began, with King Aindugude as the first archaeologically recorded king of the city. Around 2,525 before Christ, a war broke out over border disputes between the city-states of Lagash and Umma, considered the first war in human history. In the following centuries, Sumer was ruled by other significant dynasties. Then, in 2334 before Christ, the Akkadian period began, when Sargon I, king of the city of Akkad, founded the Akkadian Empire, regarded as the first empire in history, initiating the conquest of Sumer. After this, the Sumerians came under Akkadian control, until years later when the Akkadians began to lose their grip on Sumerian civilization. This occurred in 2260 before Christ, with the establishment of the Lagash dynasty. In 2193 before Christ, the Gutians began to establish their control over some Sumerian cities, expanding their dominance with the fall of the Akkadian Empire in 2154 before Christ. Then, in 2112 before Christ, King Ur-Nammu established the third dynasty of Ur, also known as the Neo-Sumerian Empire, which took control of the entire Sumerian civilization, consolidating the Sumerian Renaissance. Around 2100 before Christ, the Code of Ur-Nammu was established, considered the oldest existing legal code in the world. The kings of the third dynasty of Ur oversaw many state projects, such as complex irrigation and agricultural systems, transforming the empire into a highly centralized bureaucratic state. A large workforce was gathered to work in agriculture, particularly in irrigation, harvesting, and sowing. Textile production was particularly important in Ur at that time. Textile production was state-controlled, and many men, women, and children were employed in making wool and linen garments. Trade was crucial for the Ur dynasty, as it ensured the empire had sufficient resources to increase its wealth and care for its subjects. One of the regions Mesopotamia traded with was the Persian Gulf region. Through Gulf trade, raw materials such as metal, wood, ivory, and semi-precious stones were among the most important commodities exchanged. During this period, Sumerian texts began to be mass-produced, and the Sumerian language began to evolve into a different form. Culture also thrived through various types of art. According to estimates, by 2030 before Christ, Ur had become the largest city in the world, with around 65,000 inhabitants. However, in 2004 before Christ, the third dynasty of Ur was destroyed by the Elamites, leading to fierce rivalry between the city of Larsa, more under Elamite influence than Sumerian, and the city of Isin, under the influence of the Amorites, an ancient Semitic people. In 1894 before Christ, the Amorites established the first Babylonian dynasty, and from 1792 before Christ, with the beginning of King Hammurabi's reign, the Semites ultimately prevailed in Mesopotamia, leading to the Sumerian language and name falling into obscurity. Nevertheless, Sumerian influence in Babylon and all subsequent cultures in the region was undeniably significant, and Sumerian continued to be used as a sacred, ceremonial, literary, and scientific language in Mesopotamia until the 1st century CE. And that was the story of the Sumerian civilization, one of the earliest and most important civilizations in human history. If you enjoyed the video, please give it a like, as it really helps my work. I'll be signing off now, and I'll see you in the next video.